how digital infrastructure is evolving for marginalized groups and how the digital school is taking advantage of this.
How we can have our custom-made built-in AI for education within marginalized contexts.
To be honest, struggled a little bit with the narrative for the last few years about AI being so terrible for education, because I think this is an incredible opportunity.
When we talk specifically about generative AI, they're not built for education.
How we make sure we have the right level of AI literacy.
What advice would you give to someone who's watching this podcast, who's working with a marginalized group anywhere in the world?
It is a challenge to actually add it into the educational perspective.
And what really blew my mind with, for example, the MIT study on the cognitive debt, what it showed me the most was not that AI makes people stupid, it's that we have to design learning differently.
Welcome to the Digital Education Dialogues podcast brought to you by the Digital School, where we explore the ever-evolving intersection of education technology. I am Waleed Al Ali. I'm delighted to welcome you to season 2 of the series. This season, we have decided to focus on AI in education, to explore how artificial intelligence is really reshaping learning, teaching, and access. And each episode will take on a different angle of AI's impact for human-centered design, equity, literacy, and even the future of personalized learning and how AI is reshaping that. Also joined by my co-host, Professor Chris Dede, Senior Fellow at Harvard Graduate School of Education, and also the Associate Director for Research at the U.S. National Institute for Adult Learning and Online Education. In today's episode, we are exploring one of the most pressing and exciting topics: human-centered AI. AI is advancing at a lightning speed. But the key question remains: how do we design and use AI in ways that place people, not technology, at the center of learning? We are privileged to have two outstanding guests with us today: Mairéad Pratschke, AI strategist, I hope I said it well, AI strategist and digital education advisor, also a visiting professor at the London School of Economics Data Science Institute, and Sharifa AlGhowinem, research scientist at the MIT Media Lab Personal Robots Group, which is part of the RAISE initiative. Thank you both for being with us today. And to get started, maybe could you, each one of you, in a couple of minutes, introduce yourself and share a bit about your work.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for having us to start your second season. It's a delight to be here. So my background is digital education. I have a PhD in history, strangely enough, but I've been working in digital education for about 26 years now, always alongside my discipline. And then about 10 years ago, made the switch to fully digital. And then last year, I wrote a book on generative AI and education, which is probably why I'm here today. I've been doing a lot of work on Gen AI and how to design the kind of human-centered AI future we'd like to see.
Again, thank you also for having me. I'm Sharifa. I'm a research scientist in MIT Media Lab. My background's in AI and software engineering, so it's like totally technical. But when I got here to the Personal Robots, they do a lot of outreach and K-12 curriculum for AI. So I felt this is the future. So, and also using the robot to teach or the robot to have an intervention. So it's, I felt I am in place. So the models that we create, it doesn't stay on paper, it doesn't stay hidden. So we actually deploy it. And so I'm very excited about this session and see how human-centered AI plays out.
I'm so happy that we're focusing on human-centered AI because so many shows and reports are centered on technical AI, what we might call substitution AI. So people are saying, well, AI can now do X and AI can now do Y, and human beings don't have to do this anymore. Typically, in history, what we see is that yes, technology can substitute for people, often not quite as well, but perhaps well enough for certain kinds of tasks. And that does free people up to do other things. But that's not the big win. The big win is how the technology empowers people to do things that they couldn't do before. One way to say it is that you can focus on doing things better by using AI for efficiency, or you can focus on doing better things, which is using AI for transformative. And I think human-centered AI is a really nice way to try to encapsulate all of that, because it makes it clear that the purpose of AI isn't somehow to substitute, but instead to empower. So I'm interested in Mairéad, in what you chose to focus on in your book to try to make sure it had human-centered, and Sharifa, what you focus on in your work with the social robots to make sure that it stays human-centered rather than just technical and substitution. I'd love to hear each of your thoughts on that.
Going to make us decide who goes first, aren't you? Do you want me to start again, or Sharifa, do you want to have a go? Should I go ahead? Okay.
Go ahead.
So again, it really goes back to my background, I suppose. I have a very convoluted background in that the degree I mentioned is history, but it was always on media and representation, and particularly on visual representation of identity was what I looked at. I've always been very interested also in things like minority languages, cultures, and representation of cultures in media, and of course now technology. That's what my PhD research was on. So when I also kind of at the same side saw what was happening with this shift from digital to AI, the one thing that first of all jumped out at me was the lack of representation of most of the world in the models as a fundamental problem. So I approached it, I suppose, from that perspective first. And the second thing that stood out to me as someone who's been working in digital education since the start of Web 2, 1999 is when I really kind of started, was that I felt that many people in education were getting the wrong message about what AI was. And because they were so used to basically being sold the next ed tech tool, they were kind of passively maybe, thinking, okay, well, this will come into our classrooms and it will transform because that's what the salespeople are telling us. But that was not what I saw at all. And instead, I saw the de-skilling potentially, the kind of unwriting of certain stories, the exclusion of many voices. And I thought this technology is so radically different from a digital tool in the way that it works, and we can talk about that later if you want, that I think we have to reframe things, and we have to understand as educators that this is not just another digital or post-digital tool. This is a tool that is shaping us in a way as well, and shaping the world. So that was the perspective I came from, trying to kind of maybe unwrite a little of the narrative about ed tech in education, and understanding that there was much bigger kind of fish to fry with this one. So the book is on, I don't think I even mentioned the phrase human-centered too many times, but I really started thinking about the affordances of AI, of generative AI in particular, and the way it does come into our worlds with this kind of social, effective, affordances, that it speaks and listens and hears and acts like a person. No matter how many times we were told not to, anthropomorphize, that was and is how people interact with AI. So that was also my starting point, and I started looking at learning theory. I started thinking about digital pedagogy. What are the foundations? What are the frameworks? What are the theories that can really help ground how we work with AI, instead of just kind of passively taking this next set of tools? But how can we co-create with AI? How can we co-design AI? How can we maybe build our own AI to fill those gaps, but also to empower educators in a way that I don't think has historically happened enough. So that was the purpose of the book, really, it was to kind of try to fill a gap that I saw emerging quite quickly in the narrative about Gen AI and education. And as someone who is a digital expert, to come in and say, well, hang on, this is different. Here's how it's different. Here's what's missing. Here's what we can add. And now here are some theories and frameworks and foundations that we have from 25 years of digital education that we can use as the basis from which to design a better future with AI, not to just exclude AI, because I think AI is amazing what we can do with it, but to make sure that it serves us. That's the book in a nutshell. Yeah.
Very interesting what you mentioned. Uh, However, I agree with you, but I just don't want to go through the negative routes of generative AI, especially when it comes to teenagers using it for therapy. It's like, maybe we need to like pull the brakes or something to until we mitigate and understand. But I want to take it in the other. It is a challenge to actually add it into the educational perspective, especially because when we talk specifically about generative AI, they're not built for education. So they're only then like few other models that Google are working on. They're trying to make it have like a pedagogical methodologies or like a ways. But now, if people are going to use it, this is going to be challenging for us to make it actually a good learning platform. So we do one of the projects that we're working on is like we called PyTutor, where generative AI or ChatGPT or any like these large language models are tutoring the students who like freshly trying to understand Python programming. We want it to be empowering, accessible, so and it becomes so we the challenge was to create a prompt that actually will not give away the answer, will be encouraging, will be patient, will be personalized to the student, will be and then it's like you could see here our prompts like around I don't know how many lines to for the AI to give only one line. So, and again, when we work not only with the PyTutor, when we work with the early literacy with the Jibo, the social robot, because there's a lot of guardrails when we talk about kids like 6 years old to 10 years old, because too many hallucinations that the robot could say that will be making lies or like it was like misunderstanding or misinformation for the children. So even it was like when we had GPT plugged into Jibo with very basic prompt, I'd ask him, I was like, hey, where did you go this summer? And he said, I went to the beach and I rode the waves. I was like, no, the water will break you. No, I'm waterproof. But you're not waterproof. So like and you could see if we put this with kids and they would definitely go to questions that is not related to the story that will already adhere like prevent them from learning. So again, our prompt was already 2 pages. Stick to the story. If the child asks a question that is not related, answer, because you want to be engaged with them and have a relationship with them, but get back to the story. So it's like the story about going to the forest and seeing things, and the child will ask, do you like ice cream? The robot should say, yeah, I like ice cream, but there is no ice cream in the forest. So just like coming back to the story for them not to go into a very long conversation that is not controllable. So again, it's very, very important, as you mentioned, like when we integrate generative AI into any educational algorithms, like to make sure our guardrails are protected, we are like saving the kids from hallucination. And there's other like when we talk about education, it's easy because as you said, we have frameworks, we have like we already have like a big infrastructure to use for the guidance. But when it comes to mental health, that's what scares me because we don't have these guardrails yet implemented and having the kids, not to. But I mean, I didn't want it to go to the negative side. So positively, there is a lot we could do to make sure the learning projection is great. But I'll agree with you with what you said.
So, Dr. Waleed, in thinking about the digital school and what role AI might play, I was hearing themes that we've discussed in what both Mairéad and Sharifa said, that one of the troubling things about AI is that it is one size fits all. You can be anybody in the world that writes a prompt and it doesn't know who you are. It just generates something. And because the mission of the digital school centers on marginalized groups, students and teachers across many countries, culture and context are just really central to what it does. And also, I know that we've had discussions about the fact that for younger children, the place to start with Gen AI may be the teacher, not the students, because of the kinds of issues that both of you have raised in terms of keeping Gen AI on the rails. So I don't know if you have thoughts about what we've heard.
Thank you, and I really enjoyed the conversation, which started with with the pedagogical side and the cultural side, and how we really be very thoughtful in how we can utilize and make the best use of the potentials that AI can provide. At the digital school, because we operate across countries, like you said, Chris, if any hallucinations happened, this is our chairman, the Minister of AI, His Excellency Umar. So we have access to all sorts of AIs through his network. But he was telling me, if it's within the UAE hallucinations, then I can, help you manage that. But across borders, that will be difficult. Across different cultures, that will be difficult. So this was kind of a key concern, that because we don't want to send the wrong message, we don't want any AI tool that we use to be abused to send negative things. But at the same time, we understand the potentials and know exactly the huge potentials that AI will allow us. At the digital school, our principle in terms of designing the model of learning, because our aim is not to reach the target, which is 1 million students, but it's beyond that. It's the model. What is the model of digital education that can make education more affordable and more accessible and faster in terms of reach globally? In this way, if we prove digital education can help thousands or hundreds of thousands around the world and prove that, then it can be a viable model to millions who lack access to quality education worldwide. And we truly now believe that AI is central to scale. But the question is, like Sharifa mentioned, Gen AI is not built in for education. How we can have our custom-made built-in AI for education within marginalized context? The needs for students in Dubai or in London or Boston, where you are now, are way different than the needs for the students within marginalized context, marginalized environments. Maybe we are more toward the luxury side of AI and how we can do fancy things and advanced things, but for them the use cases are very simple, literacy, numeracy, learning to learn, very basic things that I truly believe, and I believe that AI can really help scale that at a massive level, but it has to be built in, and this is where the question that we are trying to tackle. An interesting topic that came to mind while Sharifa was talking about the learning environment, which we are used to, school, classroom, or learning environment in digital education, where there is the learning management system. All these are something, but learning environment with AI, that's something totally different and need to be thought differently. We did a couple of experiments, a couple of a pilot. Recently, we concluded a pilot where we worked with Georgia Tech, Jill Watson, and we only deployed it within a specific context in our teacher training program. So the AI was helping the educators in their learning, in their courses, and kind of a coach and a mentor for the educators, and it was very successful. So we limited, like Sharifa, the forest, and we limited it furthermore to make it focused to what they have. And part of it is the technology and the learning environment through AI, but I think a huge part is the AI literacy and how we make sure we have the right level of AI literacy among the users or among even the designers of such AI solutions. So these are some of the things. And I think today's topic about human-centered AI is I think what you mentioned. It should be designed, built in. It should be pedagogically built in. all these, I think, form the questions that we have today around how we make it really human-centered, human-centered, student-centered AI.
The literacy question is really an interesting one. For a couple of years now, I and some colleagues have been working with a school here in the Boston region. It's a middle high school independent school. It is not marginalized students. It's privileged students. But still, it's been very interesting to try to make the teachers literate about what AI can do and can't do, and the same with the students. And yesterday, I stood in front of 550 upper school students for an hour and tried to keep them interested in some old guy up on the stage. Fortunately, they're not allowed to have their cell phones because I would have been in real trouble if they'd had their cell phones. But it's a tightrope because on the one hand, I'm saying this can really be a partner for you used carefully. And on the other hand, I'm saying if you short circuit the journey of learning and just let it produce the outcome for you, the destination for you, without taking the journey yourself, you're just cheating yourself and you're not learning anything. And that's kind of a complicated message to say. So I wonder in particular, Mairéad and Sharifa, in your work with students and teachers, do you have the same kind of feeling of walking a tightrope or whatever metaphor you want to use? And how do you navigate sort of not scaring people off, but not buying into what the companies are saying, which is AI is wonderful and perfect?
So many notes from what we've been talking about in the last few minutes. There's loads of good stuff coming up. The tightrope. I mean, I think what you've just asked, Chris, is also very much what we were just talking about before in terms of the dangers built into the system and what we want to do with them, the hallucinations issue that you brought up, Waleed. So what I do when I talk to educators, and I've spent the last 3 years almost now traveling around the world talking to people all over the place. And one thing is very constant in education, and that is that they need to know they're talking to someone who understands learning. And I find that the fundamental distrust when you talk to educators, together in a room, is that they want to understand that you're kind of one of them in a way, that you understand the struggle and you understand the risks and you understand that pedagogy matters. So that's the one. And then on the other hand, as you allude to, there is sometimes that, not necessarily coming from administration, it can come from different departments, but that kind of push for efficiency, let's use it as the system to get all these things done. I don't think those things are necessarily, they can't coexist together. They can. And I think as we're kind of, our conversation is maturing around AI, we're seeing that it is absolutely fine for teachers to use AI for certain efficiencies, no problem. But that from day one, I've been saying those efficiencies don't necessarily belong in the learning process, and I mean, I think we've seen that with, for example, Barbara Oakley's new paper that's coming out on, what's it called? The memory paradox. We saw it with the MIT study, Sharifa, your people. And I think what I really got from both of those pieces showed us that we are human. We will take shortcuts. Chris, is just as well those kids didn't have their phones because they would have all been on Instagram or TikTok. It's human nature. It's human nature to take shortcuts. And what really blew my mind with, for example, the MIT study on the cognitive debt, what it showed me the most was not that AI makes people stupid. It's that we have to design learning differently. That was the number one message for me from that paper. And the reason for that was because people were putting in a 206-page paper and they asked whatever AI tool they were using to summarize it. And then they were posting their summaries. And I thought, wow, what a brilliant demonstration of the fact that humans, when they're given an opportunity to take a shortcut to learn, even the people talking about how we should use AI for learning were taking a shortcut themselves. So there's a little bit of a lesson there, I think, about what's happening with AI as it's developing. And I'll just take it back before I finish to kind of big picture. In terms of development, we are definitely moving right now from AI tools to systems. And I worry that some of those inbuilt issues will scale as well. So, we know all of the things about bias, for example, but if we are not going to correct things more fundamentally that are not corrected with things like learning modes, study guides, behavioral overlays in chatbots, if we don't get to the heart of it and create pedagogically aligned systems, it will be very difficult to teach with AI unless, teachers have to do an awful lot more work. So just back to the book very briefly, I reintroduced kind of a theory that's been talked about for decades called generative learning in my book. And I did that because generative learning is about sense making. It's not about just taking an output and saying that's the truth. It's about interrogating what maybe the machine might give you. And the reason I started with that is because the hallucinations that you talked about, Waleed, they are also built in. We can't get rid of them. So I think in a way that kind of invited me to think, well, we need to reframe how we use AI when we teach with it. And we need to think of it more as this kind of critical friend or interlocutor that we spar with, knowing that it will hallucinate and expecting that it will hallucinate. And instead of going, oh, that's a problem, I actually looked at that and no, that's our invitation for critical analysis. That's our invitation to dialogue with AI in a way that can actually sense make. So sorry, I've gone a little off topic, but I think that the issues with the systems that are tools to begin with, that are now systems, AI browsers, multi-agent systems, all of them are becoming much bigger and pervasive. Those issues, a lot of them will scale too. So I think our question then is, how do we teach with AI, but also about AI? They're two different things. To help people become aware of those things. But then the bigger question is then, how do we design education knowing that those errors exist, and how do we design for it or with it or around it? That was a very wordy answer. I'm terrible at short answers, sorry, but hopefully that answers some of the question.
So I both of you have raised very important things, because if we're having kids play with generative AI, that means they need to learn all the biases, all mitigations that's needed, how to critically assess it, and so on. So we do a lot of workshops, that is directed from middle school, where now for example, we do AI policy club. So every school will have this club to create a policy for the school about using AI. And then it's like, because banning AI or using generative AI is not the solution. They're going to use it regardless. So it's like, now it's like how to, so in the club, we like encourage including the principal, some of the teachers, the students, and then they will build together all the pillars of how to use AI in their school, giving the school vision and mission. So we start with that, and it's like it is like 6 weeks program that by the end of this is the guideline. That's like, this is how we use AI in this school, and of course, because it's different between one school to another, the output will be different between those two, and then because the student will feel ownership that they have participated in creating this policy. And then it's like every one of the stakeholders are already in line. So I think this is one of we're trying to create these policies, or like having at least the kids being aware of all the biases and all the effect, as you mentioned, like the cognitive load becomes very, very different. The skills that we're trying to teach has to be changed, because now it's like, I mean, even when I was teaching, I remember it's like, my students will go out of my class, and then they will work. In their work, there is Google. I mean, that was way before the generative AI. It's like, what is the point if I teach them how to memorize things? It's like, and I was like, I will teach you how to be an effective employee if you work on, for example, quality assurance for the software, or a requirement engineer, or So we work either project based, or like with these all like critical thinking. It's like every class is just a discussion. So at the end, and how to use Google. And it's like, because even my final exams, like, you have the internet, Google everything, find the solution, because the goal is for you to be prepared. So now I was thinking, now with generative AI, I don't know how to teach. It's like I was teaching a certain skill. It's like now generative AI will just generate whatever they wanted. It's like now how do we? So I agree with you. Everything in the education has to change from our like educators' perspective and the learner's perspective. What are the new skills that we need to create? One of the things we're trying to do again is like empowering the kids with prompt engineering, how to find hallucination, how to mitigate the hallucination, because generative AI is built in hallucination. That's the feature. It's not a bug. And it's just like you don't want it to go so high, so it becomes too not factual, but you want it to be aligned with what, as you mentioned. Uh, Google is doing Learn LM. It's a large language model specifically for learning. So it is trained in educational content. It's trained in pedagogical frameworks, and we are trying to do a study to benchmark the differences between just ChatGPT prompted with educational or like cloud or other companies also including LearnLM to see which one that actually should be used or could be used, and what's the guidelines. If you cannot use LearnLM and you use GPTs, like how should you prompt it to be like in that realm? I want to go back to what Waleed. Sorry, I'm going to long, but Waleed was talking about uh, like reaching to under-resourced communities, and that's like very important because as we have the luxury and the privilege to like being able to access all of these things in our countries, in our cities, but I know there's a lot of people who doesn't. So there's few things that we're trying to mitigate in our work. It's like we did some interventions like just teaching AI with paper-based, teaching AI without internet, because not all schools will have internet. It's like we call them unplugged activities, and even with the storybooks, when we teach kids, like can we have everything, even the questions that could be like pre-generated and then asked, at least so the child will at least think. It doesn't need like the response of the robot would be different because it's not connected to GPT or internet, but at least the child has been exposed to these questions. So we do look at under-resourced communities using AI and for them to reduce the gap between them and the privileged communities, and how can we have that. But I know it's a long way to go to do so, but I just wanted to mention that because it's very important point to us to reach out to the underserved communities.
Dr. Waleed, as you think about, what we're talking about, there's access to AI itself, and having all of the things about AI that we need to try to understand if it's going to be used well. But then there's also an infrastructure that's required beyond large language models, just a digital infrastructure that's required. And I think one of the signatures of the digital school has been that it's been very creative about finding ways of supplying digital infrastructure in different countries with different needs, with different constraints. And that without that, we could talk about AI till the cows come home and it wouldn't have any value. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how digital infrastructure is evolving for marginalized groups, and how the digital school is taking advantage of this.
And following on Sharifa point about finding creative solutions to extend the access to AI, to learning, to coding, even in underserved areas or limited internet or unplugged model, as you explained. At the digital school, as I mentioned, we are trying to kind of put the model on the alternatives and how you bridge access to digital education. And part of it is the key infrastructure devices. How can we make more devices available? We can't just say we will buy devices for everybody. As a tech sector, the cost of devices is reducing annually. I'm not sure about these last 2 years, 3 years. Things are changing, but we did some innovative solutions to recycle devices. So we adopted the circular economy. We launched a campaign last year called Donate Your Own Device instead of Bring Your Own Device in the UAE here in the Emirates. And interestingly, last month we started actually the second cycle of Donate Your Own Device. So the first cycle we gathered more than 50,000 devices. This includes, of course, functional and non-functional, working and not working devices. These 50,000 devices were around 120 ton of e-waste. And from the 50,000 devices, we managed to refurbish around 8,000 devices, which we started to ship to students around the world. Now we are moving into year 2 of the campaign, and we are gathering more and more devices. We established actually some partnerships with government and companies, and that automatically, whenever their IT policy reach a certain limit, 3 years or 4 years, depending on the organization, automatically the excess devices will be donated, and we give them all the assurances to wipe the data, refurbish the worker devices, or environmentally safe, I would say, recycle these devices. This is for infrastructure, but if we come to connectivity, again, offline solutions, how we can limit, how we can extend access to content without internet, how we can build partnerships with telecom operators across countries or within specific countries to make the internet more affordable, more accessible. And interestingly, many internet service providers are willing to facilitate or simplify access to internet for a specific educational website or educational website, similar to what happened to COVID. But they need the right model, because after all, they are a for-profit organization. They need something in return. This is what we're trying to bridge in our model. Of course, AI have a much harder challenge because it's far more expensive. But again, we are trying to find solutions. Do we really need full functionality of an AI, or do they call it small language models with an offline mode, and how we can utilize it for very specific functions? So I think part of what Chris mentioned, the question of access to AI and the use of AI, and can we kind of focus access to specific areas and functions within AI to serve learning. And if we move to areas like Sharifa mentioned, the Learn LLM, can we have a special version of Learn LLM that will help with very specific activities or functions that help in learning, either from a student's perspective or learner's perspective? That will have enormous impact. Imagine you have a Learn small LLM that will help a student or a kid enhance their literacy or numeracy skills. Only that. Imagine the impact of such thing if we make it available at scale. So this is part of our efforts to build the model and build partnerships that will make education more affordable and more accessible.
Brilliant. Can I just comment on that very quickly?
Sure.
Because the infrastructure to device to local context is so important, isn't it? Like, the more I look at the shift from tools to systems, the more it's obvious. Infrastructure is the phrase. The phrase from OpenAI was "infrastructure is destiny," and I know UAE has a partnership with OpenAI for infrastructure, right? And I was thinking about, yeah, we all need infrastructure. The EU, we're building, of course, data centers and AI factories and all that everywhere as well. But at the end of it, the usage is down to local application. It's all about context, just like AI models themselves as they develop. You'll know, Sharifa, with your robotics, it's all about context awareness, isn't it? The world models that are developing, all that stuff that's happening. But I was just thinking, this feels to me like such an opportunity for dialogical learning. I was listening to a podcast just this morning about, we're all talking about the devices that people will use for AI. Meta's glasses are the ones on everyone's, mind right now because they've just released a new one. But people were debating what will be the form factor that makes AI scalable. And one guest said it'll be earpods because we're already using them. They're small, they're portable, everybody has them. And I started thinking, I wrote about dialogical learning and generative AI and using this conversational framework as a way to, critically engage with AI. How hard would it be, to have, as you suggest, a small language model that you can use offline? We already have them. I'll mention the Google competitor, Microsoft Phi. They're small models. You can use them. There's lots of small models you can use offline. Pair that maybe, I don't know, could there be a future where we have earbuds for kids, where we have systems where we can design dialogical learning based on those, the conversational framework, for example, 6 learning activity types. How could we design really generative learning that happens in that kind of but as a dialogue with your teacher or with your AI tutor or with whoever? Is that something that could happen? Because I mean, you're absolutely right. It's all about devices. And as you were listening, Waleed, I was thinking, I'm from Ireland in the, I don't know, 17th century, I think it was. We had something called hedge schools, where because Catholics were not allowed to go to school anymore because of what was happening politically with Ireland. Long story, won't get into it. But the point is, people were learning at these schools called hedge schools because they were literally sitting around their school teacher under a tree, under a hedge, learning through dialogue, learning through conversation, And I was thinking the wonderful thing about AI is that it frees us from physical spaces, as well as it changes our concepts of time and how we use it and all that. But really, it's that idea that not just that AI has to come into a classroom, but as you guys know, with the digital school, AI can bring that classroom anywhere as long as you have the device to connect to. So anyway, I'm waffling now, but I feel like there's an awful lot of potential once we hit on that right mode, and combine it with the pedagogy, combine it with the theory, and then I think we could really get to the point where we could scale at learning that will really help. Yeah.
I see the excitement, and I'm trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle, because once we solve that AI dialogue learning tool, then we need to link it to some sort of recognition and accreditation, because we want them to get recognition and certification when they get, and then how this will link into the policy and regulators, because they will ask the question of how can we assess the quality of learning. And we take it back to the dialogue of learning and evidence of learning, and show that we have much more evidence than traditional learning context. So the future have huge potentials. It's all about how we drive it really forward in that area. Sharifa, you want to add anything?
Actually, I was excited about the dialogical learning because we're doing 2 projects about these. One of them is the social emotional learning, where we're focusing on refugee kids, where the trauma from leaving home to being integrated in a new culture, a new language, and just like everything is, it's like they will. This is our assumption, but it's also the reality that they are struggling with both missing home, trauma of leaving, and also had to learn the new language of the country that they're in. So we're using Jibo as the dialogical conversations. Like we use the stories as the triggers, because kids, especially younger ones, if you ask them how you feel, it's like they don't know. It's like hungry, jumpy, but they wouldn't create a connection or actual answer or deeper answer unless you have a trigger. For us, we're using the stories that have already been created from refugees camps that is aligned with living in a camp, or like, oh, we lost electricity, or in positive ways, because of course the writers write it in a way that's like for resilient. So we're using these stories as triggers to have conversations, dialogical reading, through the social emotional learning framework. And also we use the same things to do like for them to learn English. I mean, for now it's English and Arabic, but of course, because it's generative AI, I could scale up to if they live in Germany or live in France or UK or anywhere else, it could just speak the like teach them the language that they're the culture. So they will be integrated, hopefully. So we're working on this project. I know I've told Waleed and Dr. Leslie about this project, and we're very excited. We're very, very soon doing the pilot with refugees here in Boston. So I think that is one of the like very bright ways that allows us with the generative AI to actually do an impact. Especially, of course, with all the guardrails, with all the prompt sets is just really restrictive, but to make sure that we navigate the child emotion. So I thank you for doing this because I feel like my brain was so happy when you talked about dialogic reading.
I want to go back to literacy for a minute, because there's probably a million frameworks for AI literacy. Every time I turn around, there's another 20 reports. I'm not sure that we need a framework for every single human being on the planet, but most of those frameworks don't build on well-established frameworks for understanding other kinds of literacy that have been around for a long time. This isn't a wheel that we have to reinvent. And in fact, literacy frameworks in general tend to have, let's say, three levels. There's a functional level. How do you actually use tools that are AI? There's a critical level. When do you want to use the tool and when do you not want to use the tool? And then there's a rhetorical level of how do you expand and enhance human creativity by using the tools really well. But just talking about functional for a minute, I'm struck by the fact that the functional definition of literacy in AI in most of these frameworks is very narrow. It basically says, do you know how to prompt engineer? And do you know, how to use the menus in this or that tool, Notebook LM or whatever? And that's it. But if you go all the way back to the invention of text, moving from oral culture to written culture, yes, reading and writing were the basic functional literacy, but text is what ultimately led to schooling as a socio-technical invention. And then once you have schooling, not only are you doing reading and writing, but you're doing literacy in math, numeracy, and other kinds of literacies and other subjects. The functional literacies narrowly defined led to libraries. And the invention of the library brings together, different textual resources and allows cross-referencing and looking at different perspectives and so on. So I think an interesting question that we're not wrestling with, even at the basic level of functional literacy, is what kind of reinventions within society will be the equivalent of the library for text or the school for learning that literacy. And I think each of you have referred to the need not just to replicate schooling and standard kinds of usage, but to really step back and kind of invent what this might look like. So I don't know what your thoughts are about literacy for students and teachers, but I've been trying to get them to think at the socio-technical level rather than just the functional technical level.
I agree, it's far too narrow. I mean, I feel like the conversation about digital or just education generally in AI is incredibly narrow, as I said from the beginning, about the kind of ed tech tools, and that's all that is seen. It's so much more than that. Excuse me. I also just think, sorry, I'll come back as a humanities person now and just say, and as a historian by training, you have to think about the terminology. What does it mean to be literate? To be literate means to have the vocabulary to use something, to understand what it means in the world, right? Literate in terms of words, it means have a vocabulary, but then to use it for something. Numeracy, it's to understand numbers and maybe computational intelligence, all that stuff we're talking about with AI, but to do something with it. And I feel like, again, this has been kind of my shtick since day one, is it's not enough to just passively understand. even if we could get to that point. But it's actually, I want us to build the literacy in the sense of becoming the builders, because that's the full circle I want us to go in, to go from understanding how these machines work, understanding the flaws, understanding the good things, the bad things, but then taking that vocabulary and moving from being, receiver to builder, to designer to builder. That's the scaffold I tried to build in my book. Go from being a teacher who is used to having tools brought into their classroom and told what to do with them, to becoming maybe a designer of AI tools, the very basic stuff, the chat bots that you can do on your own at home with an open source, assistant, to now, things like vibe coding, prototypes, solutions. Not to say that every teacher can build an entirely new AI system, but we are now at the point, I think, where if we understand that AI literacy is about action rather than just about, let's learn about the ethics, but it's actually about literacy in the sense of knowing how to work with it, create with it, build with it, design with it. That actually opens it up. And for me, that's what empowers educators. And that's why I have really, to be honest, struggled a little bit with the narrative for the last few years about AI being so terrible for education, because I think this is an incredible opportunity. As people, if you are intellectually curious, and let's remember, I'm a humanities person. I am not an AI scientist, but I build silly little prototypes all the time just to share ideas, not to say that they will work, but just to say, here, this is something I'm thinking about. What might this look like? There's no reason we can't do that. Kids are doing it everywhere right now. The vibe coding hackathons are happening all over the world. So I think we should be going from that kind of, talking about learning something, becoming literate in that I understand it way, to now let's leverage it and let's build something. And if we really do want to create something new, let's be the people who lead it, because we know education and we understand learning and we know what students, we think anyway, we hope, we know what students need.
I don't think I could do any better than what Mairéad just said. I agree. It's like one of the only thing that I was thinking maybe aligned with what you're saying is the club that we're creating with the kids, for them to talk to the stakeholders that actually create like actions of policy. But all the other curriculums that we do in Raise, it's like we talk about computer vision and audio and sensors and robotics, and just to cover all and then the actions, like either they create a project or they create they follow the computational thinking, where it has to have a social impact just to connect with it. But I like what you said. It's like we have to think differently and make it more actionable. So I like what you said, and I don't think I could add anything.
I think we are all in agreement on, it's AI is disruptive for education, and core thing is to maintain the human side of it and maintain what's the end in mind. It's not just to use the tool or to have the tool. It's more about how to know it better, understand how to create with it. And I think this is what's the journey with learning. Either you are using applications, AI tools, or robotics, like in MIT Media Lab, they are utilizing these tools to enhance the experience toward enhanced learning, enhanced knowledge, better thinking of different scenarios.
Well, I think I know that we're running out of time. And I think one of the important things about the digital education dialogues that differentiates itself from the many other podcasts that are going on is that it's really about marginalized groups in particular, and the special kind of circumstances and interventions that are needed. So I'm wondering, Mairéad and Sharifa, if I could ask each of you in a couple minutes, what advice would you give to someone who's watching this podcast, who's working with a marginalized group anywhere in the world, about what are the first steps to take with AI, and if necessary, what are some of the things not to do with AI, at least at the beginning?
So for me, it really depends on the level that the person is at. So not to not answer your question, Chris, but I think about this a lot too, because I think about it in terms of the minority languages and just the plurality of languages. So, not to be tricky, but assuming now that we're heading to a world where we will all have an LLM that is trained on our language because it's starting to come into being. We're doing it in Europe. I read just this morning about one for Welsh, and I thought, my goodness, this is brilliant. I know they're working on it in Irish. I know they're working on it in Indigenous languages in North America. So first of all, I want there to be models for every language and culture and ethnicity and location, even though it does risk, I think, bringing AI sovereignty to a whole new level. But maybe that's a good kind of AI sovereignty, to have everybody represented and everybody able to do that. So, in my ideal world where people can head in that direction, I would start with really, I suppose, trying to figure out how to build my own. And this is basic. I'm not saying someone learning to prompt. I'm saying like go to, let's say, Hugging Face, an open source platform, for example, and go and build yourself maybe just a little chat bot that you train. And by train, I just mean you upload a document for yourself in your own language that maybe reflects what you want to teach, maybe about your topic or maybe about your culture, maybe in your language, for example. And just play with it a little bit to see what happens with that as one example. And one other, just I'll leave it at, I often play with the Notebook LM tool because I'm fascinated by what the models do with my own work. And it's a great example of literacy right there, because even though I'm a huge fan of the tool, I always notice it doesn't quite get it the way I intended it, or it'll miss a really key point. And that brings me back to the generative learning. So things like that, I think it's great to combine learning how to use the tools with a bigger thing that you want to do. You're not just teaching the tool for its own sake. You're learning how to use, for example, a tool like Notebook LM or an open source version by analyzing a text, or maybe creating a song, or generating a video that summarizes it, whatever. Or you're creating a chatbot to do something. And you combine, I've always done this with digital education. When I was teaching history years ago, and I was teaching people about computer modeling and using it to investigate, old tombs in England. I always combine the digital tool that I'm trying to teach people about with the topic I'm trying to teach them. So that would be my kind of starting point. Don't just test the tool in isolation. Bring it into your domain, bring it into your area of expertise, and play with something to literally just make something small that is relevant.
This is very great. But my advice is, if it's their educators or parents, they have to start with themselves. There's a course that we built with Google about generative AI for educators, where it goes through different steps so that the educator or the parent would know, so they would be able to guide their kids. And I think that's that one of the issues that we're facing, and we're doing a study with Qatar now. It's like, are the educators know how to use it, instead of just like, and how can we shift their mentality of AI if they're given with these courses and workshops. It's only 2 hours, so nothing crazy if they're like someone's schedule. But so I think that would be a start for them to be aware. And then and I like what you said, Mairéad. It's like, because if you ask it a question that you already know, you would know how much hallucination is happening. But when we ask a question that we don't know, it's like, oh, we're impressed about how great it is, but it's just because we're lack of the knowledge. The last thing I want to add is, like, I don't think these LLMs are good for mental health yet. They need to be designed. So I would really work hard to go against using it as a therapy, because when we did a survey for middle schoolers, 25% are using it for therapy. And it's like, no, because it's like, therapy specifically, you don't want the AI to be agreeable and just like, you need to challenge your negative thoughts. So I feel like this is one of the biggest problems I could see happening with teenagers or kids using it for mental health. But these are the advice against and advice with.
We need a whole other episode on affective AI. You're absolutely right. And you're absolutely right about the foundations. And I'll just do another plug. There's loads of courses out there for people. The Google ones are brilliant. There's another one, I think Anthropic has released one on AI fluency. Microsoft has a whole bunch. All the big tech companies have AI courses that are out there. But there's also loads of stuff just on, even on YouTube. And of course, you can always read my book.
This is why we did a whole series about AI in education. And I think key thing that I would like to highlight is it's important to better understand, always try to ensure that people know what is AI and generative AI in design in principle and how it works, because it's not Google search, it's totally different. And the other thing is everybody have, their different maybe starting point or focus of use cases to build on. So everybody try to utilize it to add value in the areas that you can really, judge and drive forward. If you are a content creator in education, then utilize AI to create content better, to create it faster, make it more affordable and available. And then you plug it into the whole education, either input process or output outcomes that leads into that. But I think we will see great things ahead. And I think we are almost at the last few minutes, unless Chris, you want to close with something? We always have the question, what is next? But I think we always ask the question, what would you expect to see in the next 5 years? But 5 years within AI is too long.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm excited about. Sharifa, I want your job. I want to go and learn all about robots because I'm obsessed with what's happening with robotics right now. I think that the multi-agent world and robotics is going to come together in a way that is going to be hugely exciting. That and world models, those three, I think simulations, experiential learning, it's going to be really, really exciting few years. And that I think is also a really interesting invitation for education to start doing some already work that's well underway. And Chris, of course, works in that area himself, I know, but I think that's going to be phenomenal. It's basically all of these cutting edge technologies coming together and creating something exciting.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
I would just add in closing that what I said to the high school students, which is this is really a pivotal time in history. Even understanding all the limitations of Gen AI, which often people do not, it's still going to change a lot of things in the world. And you can be a part of that change. I said to the students, you're coming of age at a time when even somebody in high school can make a big difference in history by getting out and being creative and thoughtful about AI in the way that we've been discussing. So don't be shy, I guess, is what I told them. Don't be shy. Don't think I'm just a kid. This is a time when all of us are having to reinvent ourselves.
So I think we are coming at closing. This has been really an inspiring session. Thank you, Mairéad. Thank you, Sharifa, for sharing your insights, your vision, your experience. And thank you to the listeners for joining the first episode of Season 2 for Digital Education Dialogues. Throughout the season, we'll continue to explore how AI and education can come together to create more inclusive, equitable, and human-centered futures. Until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.